Do I believe she achieved her physique by doing these workouts? Absolutely not. I always kind of question, like, how do I start the video? What's the first thing I'm going to say? And it's usually something about the day of the week, but I'm trying to be different today. So we're not going to talk about the day of the week. We're going to talk about probably the video, to be honest. Hello, welcome back to the channel. I'm obviously doing a video because hopefully you're watching the video. And we're going to talk about some things. But this time, it's going to be a slightly different approach. A lot of times I kind of speak about potentially the influencer in question and the kind of content I'm observing, which I am going to do. We're going to deviate from the path ever so slightly. And we're going to talk about a trend. Few things before we start. 1,100 likes on the video in the first 24 hours is the goal. So if we could smash that, that would be bloody stupendous. And I would really appreciate it because obviously it shows me that you like that kind of content and want to see more of it. If you are watching this video and you haven't already subscribed, which I know there's a high likelihood you haven't, 2 seconds of your time just to click the red button down below and the bell next to it so you can subscribe to the channel and get notified when I upload every week, twice a week, because although you don't have to, I would really appreciate it if you did. It helps the channel out massively. It tells the lords of YouTube that people tolerate my content and my oversized forehead. They then decide, you know what, maybe we should show that content to more people, and they push it out like that. If you have a question you want me to answer at the end of the next video, drop it down below in the comment section, because at the end of every video I do comment question of the week. So I've taken a slightly different approach on this one, and I've decided to go for baby hats. But we're going to go with it because it's kind of cool and kind of cute, I think. I like dinosaurs. We're going to talk about the workout first, and we're going to talk about the kind of trend that follows it. Someone actually left this workout in the comment section a few weeks ago. So yes, I do listen to what you tell me to look at, and I do look at it. It's Daisy Keech, someone I have covered a couple of times in the past. Toned shoulders workout, 8 minutes. We're going to dissect.
I put together some of my favorite shoulder exercises that I do just to keep my arms long and lean and nice and toned.
Keeping my arms long. Is that a thing? Am I missing something? Maybe I'm missing something. I've never heard him say I want to keep my arms long. You can't lengthen your arms. And I know she probably means she wants to maybe keep them slim, thus maybe appearing longer, if that's a thing. The way that it was kind of described as keep my arms long is a bit questionable. Some people may actually take that at face value, which is very understandable. So I'm going to mute this because we're going to go through it together as we see it. So commando planks, would I deem it to be an effective shoulder movement? Perhaps not. I think other muscles kind of take the dominance here. Supermans, which is actually something a lot of people do for lower back injuries at times. Do I deem it to be an effective shoulder movement? No, you are not actually taking the shoulders through a range of motion, to be honest. That's the main thing. It's far more lower back dominant. Ultimately, the shoulders will probably burn a bit because when they lift off the ground, they are going to be under some kind of tension, which is just going to be gravity and obviously holding that position. Does it take them through an active range of motion in which mechanical tension is considered and mechanical application is considered? No. Is it a good shoulder movement? Perhaps not. We're kind of just going to bounce through the first half of this workout because the second half gets bloody spicy and that's what I want to see. The lateral raise isn't a bad movement. When doing a lateral raise, there are a few things to consider. Lesson time. So the dumbbell lateral raise is a bit limited. The point in which your kind of delts are at their shortest, in which obviously they're contracting, is when your arms out like so out to the side, peak contraction here, which is also the point in which they're at their weakest as well, because that's just how the shoulders work, unfortunately. Doing a dumbbell lateral raise is tricky because the weight is at its lightest at the bottom and heaviest at the top because obviously gravity. The muscles are at their weakest at the top, but the weights are at their heaviest at the top. Do you see how that can be quite limiting? So regardless of how big you get, you will never see somebody doing dumbbell lateral raises with good technique massively heavy. Obviously heavy is subjective to strength and strength is relative, but you're not going to overload that to a mass degree. And it is also another movement that's really hard to overload. Variations of this movement that might be better. Daisy does have a cable machine. Something like a cuffed lying cable lateral raise is a really good variation to do. Favors the kind of strength curve of the muscles a lot more, and I think it's still going to be a movement you're actually going to be able to progressively overload far further on. And for those reasons and a few others, I would deem it to be a more effective shoulder movement and a more effective lateral raise variation than the typical dumbbell lateral raise. The Arnold press I've kind of already covered before, potentially what one would deem to be optimal, potentially not due to you essentially going through a very similar range of motion without the muscles really changing too much compared to a standard dumbbell press, essentially leading you to lift less weight due to the slight differences in the initiation of the movement being this. So for that reason, obviously potentially not optimal. The big thing I want to talk about here is it's almost like the lack of effort that I want to discuss. You see the movement. So Daisy is lifting weights that I know she's very capable of lifting. She's more than capable of lifting heavier than this. And she doesn't really seem to be trying particularly hard. The first rep and the last rep were kind of the same speed. And realistically, when you are trying to build muscle, you want to train to, if not close to, failure. I can put money on Daisy being able to do at least double the number of reps she performed there. Therefore, not close to failure at all. The kind of progress from doing these workouts consistently is going to be extremely limited. Progressive overload is obviously key and big, but if you're progressive overloading an undershot weight, i.e. a weight that is actually too light for you, you're not reaching that kind of, I would say like golden zone or green zone of hypertrophy in which you are in close proximity of failure. The front raise, again, is a movement I wouldn't often do because if you're doing sufficient presses, horizontal presses or vertical presses, you probably don't need to do any front raise variations unless you're a bodybuilder perhaps, and that's an area you need to develop a bit further. If you are going to front raise, I prefer do it with a neutral grip. The bent over fly, she says she does 20, but I'm pretty certain she does 10. Again, it's an okay movement. I would actually prefer doing it on a cable machine, in which I would kind of stand and kind of pull slightly down. Very similar to dumbbell lateral raise. I feel like there's greater potential for progressive overload on that movement. If you are going to do it with a dumbbell, I personally prefer do it with my pinkies up. So rather than neutral grip, I like the overhand grip, so the pinkies lead. Now this is where it gets fun. Shoulder circles. The kind of big question here is why? For what purpose? So considering Daisy is often using resistance in these workouts, that would kind of imply or suggest that she's looking for some kind of muscular benefit there, potentially hypertrophy. Doing movements like this is not going to yield the results you desire, and that's why I want to discuss this. Your shoulders will burn, absolutely, especially after doing one movement one way and then the other movement, basically the same movement the other way. I've said this many times, but hurting it doesn't mean you're working it. So the big things to consider when looking at building muscle are a few things. Mechanical tension, which I have mentioned many times before, which is obviously the weight lifted, like load shifted. To then progressively overload, you would increase mechanical tension. So you would maybe do an extra rep, lift it a little bit more, something like that. How would you progressively overload a bodyweight arm movement that actually has very limited resistance in the first place, like a shoulder circle? Number two, a sufficient range of motion, i.e. just holding contraction isn't going to yield a lot, whereas if you actually took it through a range of motion, you're likely going to yield better results. Number three, you also got to look at mechanical application, which is arguably as important, as some would actually say more important than mechanical tension. These movements, these light bulb movements, what is it trying to achieve? This is very similar to the workouts I have seen from like Blogilates. So I have an issue with this because a lot of the rest of this workout is very similar to this, as you'll see. Flutters, back flutters, now you're doing overhead press when you've literally just done that with a dumbbell, now you'll do it with no weight. This is essentially a lateral raise, but again with no weight. And what is this achieving? You're holding the arms above your head and just flicking your hands. What is the purpose of doing this? That is the question. Again, what is the purpose of doing that? The shoulder position is not changing whatsoever. You are not going through a range of motion, you're just holding contraction and just flicking your wrists. And that's pretty much the workout, unfortunately. She does speak about how you can do it 3 to 5 times. There are a few things I want to cover. So if you search Daisy Keech, I went searching this video, I searched Daisy Keech 8 minutes, because it's 8 minute shoulder workout. So I didn't expect much other than this to come up. But then you're bombarded by 8 minute go-to clinch waist workout, hourglass abs workout, 10 minutes. I tried Daisy Keech's 8 minute ab workout. Then even look at Emi Wong as well, 10 minute exercise and stretch for the shoulders, neck and collarbone area, which I have covered before. Booty pyramid, 10 minute workout. Wherever you go, you're bombarded by these 8 minute, 10 minute workouts. And the issue I have with these, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them are very similar to the workouts that I've shown you here, in which Daisy is basically causing muscles to contract and burn, thus kind of giving the illusion that the workout is achieving something and going to take you somewhere. It doesn't work like that. We've kind of already spoken about the principles of hypertrophy, like building muscle, and a lot of times if you are doing these workouts, you probably want to build a little bit of muscle. I'm not saying you want to get massive, big jack strong, but you may want to build a little bit of muscle. And to do that, the principles remain the same. It would make more sense to kind of train optimally, provided you enjoy it, because obviously enjoyment is more important than how optimal a program is, because if you don't stick to it because you don't enjoy it, it's not actually optimal whatsoever. But let's say you do enjoy it. It would make more sense to train optimally and achieve those results faster and hopefully maintain a more sustainable lifestyle change by doing so. I don't always just want to kind of react and comment on just the workouts of other people and what they're doing. I also want to provide a bit of a lesson, and that's what this is kind of covering, which is these 8 minutes and 10 minute workouts often don't work because the movements selected and shown throughout those workouts are not effective movements. Will a 10-minute workout, provided the movements selected are optimal, be effective? They can be. But again, that's very dependent on the goals and what you're trying to achieve. As I've said before, something is always better than nothing. Expectations need to be realistic here. And that's another issue I have with these workouts, is a lot of people promote these workouts in a manner that implies you are going to achieve the results that they have achieved by doing these workouts. Daisy has a fantastic physique. She's in fantastic shape. We all know that. She looks bloody splendid, as they all do. Do I believe she achieved her physique by doing these workouts? Absolutely not. I believe there's a lot more resistance training involved, and I believe this is not something that she has built by doing 8-minute workouts. I feel like she is producing these 8-minute and 10-minute workouts because they are probably more favourable in the algorithm. More people want to see them. I know a lot of people argue, like, oh, it gets people into training, which is fantastic, and I do appreciate that. As I've said so many times before, I will always appreciate and respect the fact that people like Daisy and other content creators are getting people into lifting. When you kind of imply unrealistic expectations, which then leads to people not achieving what they've expected to achieve, you are now potentially playing with people's feelings and emotions, because they may feel quite disappointed in themselves. They may feel like they haven't achieved something because what they're doing is wrong, and that they're maybe not cut out for things like this. When it's not the case. Actually, what you're doing that's wrong is potentially the workout because it's ineffective. That's why I think you should be so careful with these kind of workouts. I think if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I'm not saying you have to train for hours each day. Like I said, something's better than nothing. But what I'm saying is, if you're going to do an 8-minute workout, quality over quantity. Select a few movements, but do them really well. And make sure they're effective movements. Okay, we'll talk about shoulders. I'm going to do 2 movements. I'm going to do a dumbbell press, seated, and I'm going to do a lying cable lateral raise. I'm going to do between 2 and 3 sets on each movement. I'm going to do all of those sets to absolute failure, if not bloody close to failure. I know you're thinking, Harry, Daisy's done about 15 movements and you've only done 2. Both workouts will take, let's say, 8 to 10 minutes. But I put money on it now, provided you are doing a little bit more each week, i.e. 1 extra rep, a little bit heavier weight, whatever it may be. The workout that includes 2 movements, but effective movements, is going to be far superior to a workout that includes 15 ineffective movements. If you only have 10 minutes, or you can only tolerate 10 minutes because you don't really like working out, or maybe you're new to working out and 10 minutes is your target, which is fantastic. Do 2 movements, do them properly. The issue I have with these workouts, so many people capitalize on them because a lot of people don't know any better, unfortunately, because there's so much conflicting information in the fitness industry. You don't know what to believe anymore. One person says this, but a magazine said this, but another creator says this. It's like, well, who do you trust and who do you know to believe? I'm never going to preach anything to you that I don't deem to be effective and I don't deem to be correct. And whatever I do preach to you is going to be based on a few things. Number 1, literature I've read, so essentially like scientific backing. And number 2, experience and personal application. I will never make you do something I would not do myself. And if it wasn't effective, I wouldn't do it. Another thing, which is going to be the final point I want to mention, is when you see the things like the flicks, you know, like the overhead flicks, it's more Instagrammable. And by that I mean, it looks different. It's a bit more exciting, so there's a bit more movement there. Therefore, it's more likely to get engagement. It's cooler to see online, because what looks cooler, this or this? There's more movement in the second one, so you'll be like, oh, it's a bit more interesting. Therefore, likely, you're going to be a bit more curious of what's occurring. And I just think that's such a problem because it's leading so many people down a very suboptimal and potentially harmful path. Like I said, a lot of people getting these unrealistic expectations of what they're going to achieve, and they feel pretty crappy about themselves when they don't achieve it. But this influencer looks amazing and they're doing these 8-minute workouts. Why don't I look as amazing as them? Because you're not them. Everyone has their own genetic makeup. Everyone looks how they look. We have different arm lengths, we have different shapes, we have different sizes. There's so many things to consider. And another thing to consider is, are they being honest with you? Did they achieve their figure and their physique doing what they're showing themselves doing? Or did something else go into it behind the scenes? And you can't always take things at face value, which is very much, as I said, why I have a problem with these 8 to 10 minute workouts and why I deem a lot of them to be ineffective and why I would say many of them don't work. But now we must crack on with comment question of the week. Where would you point someone who's a total beginner looking to get into lifting? Ultimately, it depends on your goals. If your goals are, let's say, getting bigger and stronger potentially, I'd either look at like a very basic program, like maybe starting strength. There are obviously some issues with it, as there are with anything, but it's an okay program to get started with. If you're looking at content creators, I'd recommend gandering at. You've got people like Jeff Nippard, who's very evidence-based, we like that. You've got people like Lucy Davis Fit, people like Meg Squats, for example. Learn the basics, but make sure you learn them properly. Look at Jeff Nippard's videos on, let's say, how to squat, for example, in which he covers it pretty extensively. Nail your technique first, and then worry about the weight when you're comfortable doing so. So you spend some time building the foundations before you start then building the house. But that is it. that is a video. As I said at the start of the video, 1100 likes in the first 24 hours is the goal, so we will shoot for that. If you haven't already, please do click the red button down below and subscribe to the channel. Please do consider clicking the bell next to it so you get notified when I upload every week, twice a week. And if you two have a question you want me to answer at the end of the next video, drop it down below for comment question of the week and I shall do so. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my extremely small hat. And thank you for tolerating the video.